One evening, I was on a monorail. I can't recall where it was. I just remember that it was really dark, late in the evening. The sky was inky, as novelists say, inky black, and lights were passing through the windows as the monorail went along. We slowed to enter a tunnel. Again, it was pitch dark. The monorail suddenly stopped. The engines went off, and there was no more moving. Just as we stopped to a jolt, there was a tiny voice in the darkness, a thud, bump, and then a voice that said, "I'm okay." The lights came back on, and there was a little boy standing next to a woman. I'm assuming it was his mother. He was rubbing his head and smiling. One of the passengers, the other passengers, had a thumbs up and said, "Way to go, you're okay." Ever since then, I've thought about that little boy. And in fact, I think I've taken it in because about 2 weeks ago, I got in the car with my beloved, my spouse, and the passenger side. And just as he was to back out of the car, I said, "Wait, I had to go get something." So he stopped. I opened the door, and I had put my purse in the floorboard. However, my foot took hold of the handle of the bag, and I rolled onto the driveway out of the passenger side. Immediately, I went, "I'm okay." I didn't know if I was okay. Like, who does that? I didn't know if I hurt my hip. I didn't know if I was bruised. I think I was okay, but I didn't want any attention in my direction. I didn't want my neighbors to know what I'd done. Isn't it interesting that many of us here would rather, anytime we're struggling, go, I'm okay, no problems here. We'd rather do that than say, yeah, I could use some help. I think it has to do with society's discomfort, with vulnerability, with our uneasiness, with asking or needing help in any way. And yet, all of us in this room, looking around, many of you, most of you know by now, life is a series. We know this for a fact, a series of ups and downs, times when we need help and times when we have help to offer. Sometimes, rather than asking for or accepting help from others, we would rather yell, "I'm okay," even if blood was present, a bone was protruding through a piece of skin, or our heart was breaking. You and I have been raised in a culture that looks a lot like white supremacy, and one of the aspects of this culture is that we are survival of the fittest. We have heard, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. Suck it up. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. I love that one. In this form of culture, to ask for help, to accept help is viewed as a weakness, which doesn't seem right. Now, does it? Because we know for a fact that throughout our lives, we're going to need help. We need one another. How do we build a beloved community if we remain stuck in a culture of ideas that are no longer needed for today and the world that is speedily heading in our direction? Rather than pity the person who needs help, we need to bring our focus back to the power of community, how we assist when needed, and then how we become comfortable asking for help. How do we change from seeing vulnerability as a strength and not a weakness? Brené Brown said, vulnerability is not winning or losing, it's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. When hard things occur in our lives, such as the loss of a job, the death of a parent, a spouse, a child, the loss of a pet, a friend, The diagnosis of a life-threatening illness whereby a changed life of treatments and uncertainty comes flying at you. The jolt that you didn't see coming. How we learn to respond with more ease than the traditional spiral of despair. How do we do this? To whom or to what will we reach? How will we make the leap of a new life, a changed life? The parable of the trapeze has to do with change, with transitions. I don't know who the original author was, but it looks like this. Sometimes this author wrote, I feel that my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging on to the trapeze bar, spinning and swinging along for a few moments in life. I'm hurtling across space in between trapeze bars. Most of the time I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. It carries me along in certain steady rate of swing, and I have the feeling that I'm in control of my life. I'm good. I know most of the right questions and can answer some of the questions. But every once in a while, as I'm merrily or not so merrily swinging along, I look out ahead of me into the distance, and what do I see? Another trapeze bar heading in my direction. It's empty, and I know that in the place of me that knows for sure, I'm going to have to grab that trapeze bar. It has my name on it. It's my next step coming to me. In my heart of hearts, I know that I must release my grip on the present, well-known bar and move to a new one. Each time it happens to me, I hope, no, I pray, said this author, that I won't have to let go of my old bar completely before I grab the new one. But in my knowing place, I know that I must totally release my grasp on the old bar, and for a moment in time, I must hurtle across space before I can grab onto the new one. The massive weight of vulnerability is exhausting. Each time I'm filled with fear and terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous hurdles across the void of unknowing, I've always made it. I am each time afraid that I will miss, that I will be crushed on unseen rocks in the bottomless chasm below the bars. I do it anyway. Perhaps this is the essence of what the mystics call the faith experience. No guarantees, no net, no insurance policy. But you do it anyway because somehow to keep hanging on to that old bar is no longer on the list of alternatives. I soar across the dark void of the past is gone and the future is not here yet. It's called transition. I've come to believe that this transition is the only place where change occurs. I mean, real change, said the author, not the pseudo change that only lasts until the next time my old buttons get pushed. I've noticed that in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as a no thing, a no place between places. Sure, the old trapeze bar was real. And that new one is coming toward me. I hope that it's real too. But the void in between is just that. It's scary, confusing, disorienting, nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible. No, we don't go through it quickly, as fast as possible. What a wasted opportunity that would be. I have a sneaking suspicion that the transition zone is the only real thing, and the bars are illusions we dream up to avoid the void where real change, the real growth occurs for us. Whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored. Yes, with all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can, but not necessarily accompany transitions. There are still the most alive. These places are the most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives. I'm not quoting that author anymore. You know, I question the last part of that piece. I mean, sometimes a person isn't interested in delving deep into pain for any kind of growth. Not interested. Thank you. Who wants that? And yet, there is no question, life is a series of chapters of transitions. I had a professor who was divorced and married later in life. This was in seminary. The two of them were so happy. He was in his 60s. I believe she was 10 years younger. They married and went on a honeymoon overseas. While touring, the woman doubled over with pain. They immediately flew back to the States, wheeling her through security and straight to a hospital for a series of tests. She came home, was on hospice care for 2 weeks, and died. You can imagine how he was reeling. Now, I contracted with the seminary to finish teaching his last 6 weeks of classes, art and world religions. That was my major. He was so distraught, and he told me, my grief counselor said that I should view this recent change as a new chapter in life. I don't want a new chapter, this learned man said. Hell, I don't even want the same book. He was grieving. Dr. Frank Birch Brown had a stroke a few years ago. This brilliant man can barely communicate, let alone teach, read books, and write. I grieve the loss of a friend and a mentor. So what helps in the midst of change as we exist in the void between an old life and the changed life, the struggle between what was and what is coming? What are the lifelines? Where are they? One lifeline, a profound lifeline, and most of us have no understanding of the power of this one, and that is simply to have a witness to what you're going through. Studies were done about those who struggled the most, and many people struggled who weren't aware of witness, somebody watching them as they went about their life. A witness can be someone who's there for you, to listen to you with no active advice. This is important. Unless they ask. We can be there for each other to listen. Don't say, well, if I were you, this is what I'd say. I'm listening. And if that person says, how do you do this? How do you recover? Then you can share your advice. But listen, this seems so cliche, doesn't it? But we won't grab this lifeline unless we are willing to be vulnerable, to admit that allowing somebody else to witness is helpful, which goes back to what I said earlier about the need to change our culture of, I got this, I don't need help. The flip side of allowing others to listen and to help is helping and listening to others. This too becomes a lifeline because fostering connections in reciprocal ways saves lives. Lao Tzu said, being deeply loved gives you strength. Loving deeply gives you courage. Making art, the process of creating something rather than the product itself, is a lifeline. Singing is a lifeline. Sarah Vaughan said, when I sing, trouble can sit on my shoulder and I don't even notice. Walking, sitting, simply viewing nature is a lifeline. Get this, there was a study in 1984. It was called View from a Window. Researchers studied patients in a hospital who were recovering recent surgeries. So they took half the patients and put them in a room that had a window facing a brick wall. Half the patients had a room facing some trees, some park, some aspect of nature. They found, the results came like this. They found that the people in the rooms with the brick wall called the nurses more often and were in the hospital longer than the ones who were in rooms with a window overlooking nature. This is the beginning of ecotherapy, where we understand more the power of nature to help us. In 2005, there was a study at the University of Essex. Researchers noted that prescribing walks in nature worked as well as some treatments for depression, such as meds. Of course, we know this doesn't work in all cases, but in mild or light cases of depression, spending time in nature can be a lifeline to better health and a sense of well-being, finding more centeredness in the midst of chaos. Poetry, books, counseling, conversation, laughter, prayer, communal and personal practices of faith are all lifelines if we will but let go of our fear of vulnerability and be open to support in one form or other, which reminds me, in this Unitarian Universalist congregation, there are people here who are eager to provide support. For all in this room who are pastoral associates or a care team, would you please raise your hand? And I want to pause to notice. I'm all here to notice these people have offered to be a listening ear and to provide support should you need it. Thank you. These are the individuals who will listen. Which reminds me, do you know what the word pastoral means? We've heard in other traditions somebody say, that's our pastor. This is our pastoral care team. So it's originally has to do with a shepherd, one who takes care of sheep. And I know in many of our places we say, we don't want to be like sheep and follow. But it's more about the shepherd. So pastoral associates, this word pastoral comes from mid-13th century relating to shepherd, or one who feeds, tends, guards, and protects. UUC, we have a history of shared ministry for each of us. We have these individuals who will be here for one another, to tend, to guard, to protect, to feed each other. We are here to support one another in times of joy and sorrow, to feed, to tend, to guard, to protect one another as best we can through life's succession of changes. May it be so, and thank you for listening.